I'm here to see Tom Reed.
Mr. Reed is currently unavailable, but if you'd like to make an appointment, Mr.
Fisher. I used to work here.
I recently went back and reviewed the last Splinter Cell game they released with Splinter Cell Blacklist. We already know my thoughts on that game, and I thought, fuck it, I'll go back and I'll take a look at my favourite Splinter Cell game in Splinter Cell Conviction. Now yes, some people will say that it is the lesser of these Splinter Cell games because it's pretty linear, but the story is pretty great, and as of this time of recording and the video editing and uploading and everything itself, it was Michael Ironside's last Splinter Cell game. Splinter Cell Conviction starts with a retired Sam Fisher being called back into the life of being an agent, but rather than returning to Third Echelon, the company he worked for, he's basically a bit of a rogue agent and acts like a wanted fugitive too. A quick story summary is that Sam Fisher's daughter Sarah was killed by a drunk driver, but actually it was a character called Audrey Coben who was hired to kill her, and also Fisher's daughter is still alive. So Sam is roped into saving the world, or in this instance, the United States. Splinter Cell Conviction starts as a revenge story with Sam hunting down Audrey Coben before learning about plans to set off EMPs and overthrow the President of the United States. Sam's then basically dragged into a conflict that he's not involved in and into saving the United States, all while getting phone calls from his daughter to prove that she's alive, but also blackmailing him and pulling him along the ground to basically keep the story going and the plot going, bringing Sam Fisher in to save the President. Gameplay wise though, this is the most accessible Splinter Cell game I would say, and yes, while it is linear, it is a gateway drug into the series. The first level is basically a simple tutorial about how to go into cover and the weapons and the executability and the stealth system. At its core, Splinter Cell Conviction is a simple third-person stealth shooter. You'll be jumping into and out of cover and shooting, and if you treat Splinter Cell Conviction like Ghost Recon, you'll be getting destroyed because Sam Fisher can't take that much damage, especially if you've got enemies with shotguns rushing towards you as well. Also, Conviction has an outline system of where you were last seen and where an enemy thinks you are. If you get caught by enemies and you're stuck in a firefight, an outline of Sam Fisher will appear and enemies will assume that's where you are because that's where you were last seen. So when that happens, you want to flank or go into the roofs or climb some pipes or shoot out some lights, and possibly take out enemies from behind to earn yourself an execution token. When you sneak up to enemies and take them out, you'll earn the ability to perform an execution where Sam Fisher targets his enemies with markers above their heads, and when they turn red, Sam can instantly headshot the enemies just taking them out. Depending on what weapon you're using too will also change how many markers you can set. For example, some pistols might only have 2 markers while others might have 4. And throughout each mission too, you'll find resupply crates where, just like in Blacklist, you can resupply your weapons and your ammo and your gear and stuff, but you can also change your loadout and further upgrade your weapons. You can add sights and suppressors and more to weapons, but it's pretty bare bones stuff, but it does further upgrade and sort of come in handy. As you progress through a decent variety of locations and missions, Sam will get new weapons, gadgets and tech. You'll start off pretty bare bones with a simple pistol and a car mirror to look under doors, before getting a smartphone with a spy camera, and then a portable EMP that's hidden inside a special and cool ass backpack, and before you know it you've broken into Third Echelon and you've got sonar goggles, which are an upgraded version of Sam Fisher's standard goggles, allowing him to see through walls and obviously see in the dark. You'll also have access to standard gadgets too, like the sticker cameras that can be upgraded to explode, portable mines, EMP grenades on top of the portable EMP inside your backpack, standard explosives and more. However, obviously this Splinter Cell title is a pretty decent change from previous entries, but by far my favourite part of this game is the cell system. Previously we've had a light bar that would tell us if Sam Fisher is hidden in darkness and undetectable, or whether he could be potentially caught. Here in Conviction it's a simple hidden or not stealth system by putting the game into black and white. When Sam is hidden in the shadows, the game reverts to black and white except for enemies which are in colour, or points of interest which are in colour like a hanging engine or something, and then when the game reverts back into colour, that's because Sam is out in the open, maybe a street light is pointing on him and enemies can potentially see him. Now, one of the reasons I absolutely love Splinter Cell Conviction and why it's one of my personal favourites is a simple yet nerdy reason. I played the living shit out of this game during a trip to New Zealand when I was younger. While my family would go out to bars and pubs and drink, I'd be home alone playing Splinter Cell Conviction, playing it on the hardest difficulty, fully immersing myself into the role of Sam Fisher out for revenge. I might have been too young to go to a nearby bar, but I wasn't too young enough to interrogate and crush some mercenaries. Each level 2 in Conviction feels like Sam Fisher returning to his roots a bit. First level's basically tutorial and how brutal this game can be with its interrogations, as they're fucking great using the environment and it's pretty fucking brutal. Then you slowly get more gadgets and gear and you start to feel like the Sam Fisher of old before basically running headfirst into the White House. Also, what's more badass than basically being the best spy in the world running around in a green jumper and cargo pants? If you're wanting more traditional Splinter Cell, the co-op mode is fucking awesome. Now, having played it a couple times in the past with friends, there's always a load of fun to have with you and a friend sneaking around and taking out goons. Sadly though, none of my mates had it on PC, so I couldn't fire up Conviction's co-op this time around, but I highly recommend it. Though I love Conviction, I can definitely understand why some fans have some problems with it, especially hardcore fans that have loved previous more challenging entries in the series, to be given a title that's quite linear. There are some areas of some levels that have a bit more of an open approach, but honestly, not much. If you go from Conviction to Blacklist, they feel like they're two completely different games. Now sure, they're both stealth games, but Blacklist has multiple ways to play with the point system and upgrades and such. While Conviction sort of echoes back to those quick story games like The Force Unleashed, where you played the story mode once or twice, and then you sort of forgot about it. Sure, it is a fantastic story with great voice acting and the graphics still hold up, but once you've finished it, there's no real reason to replay it unless you love the series or you love the game. There's also that level. Now, if you've played Conviction, then you probably know what I mean by that, and there is one level where you go from basically playing a Splinter Cell game to playing a shitty Ghost Recon game. Basically, it's a flashback, and rather than stealth being the key element, it is a cover shooter that feels like a lesser Ghost Recon level. You'll still have Sam Fisher's health too, so after a couple of bullets, you'll drop like a sack of shit. You'll be using a AK-47 with no silencer and a scope, and there's no option to go quiet. This entire level is just take out a wave of enemies, move forward, and repeat. Even the end of the level is basically hold your position and take out enemies until the level ends. It doesn't really suit a Splinter Cell game, a bit like how that racing mission in Mafia didn't make any sense. Towards the end of the game too, Splinter Cell Conviction goes from a stealth game to more of an action title. Now sure, the story sort of leads towards that with this siege in Washington DC and the destruction on the streets, but I haven't played this game in about 4 or 5 years, and seeing a car of mercenaries rock up knowing I can just lob a grenade at the enemies and that'll just take care of all of them removes all sense of urgency or threat or wanting to do any stealth tactics. Also, at the end of the game, you'll go up against enemies with helmets that require 2 shots in the head before they go down, and fellow Splinter Cell agents who use sonar goggles so they can see you through walls, and if you throw a grenade at their foot, sadly, even on the hardest difficulty, the enemies are not smart enough to move out of the way. Also, there are some missions or points in missions where you'll need to sneak past enemies without being seen, pretty much like, any Splinter Cell game. But unlike Blacklist, where you couldn't harm any guards, you can flat up kill the guards you need to sneak past. For example, there is a part in a mission where you sneak into 3rd echelon and you go through the garage to take out some generators. If you get caught, bodies are seen, or you shoot out a security camera, you fail and restart the mission. You can flat up shoot enemies and sneak up behind them and kill them, but you can't move bodies at all, period, unless you grab an enemy and use them as a human shield before you kill them. It got pretty frustrating that you would fail a mission because some random guard would find a body that you couldn't move. Though while the game is linear and has more of an action focus to it rather than espionage, there are moments in the story that even for a game as old as Conviction, you feel the rage and emotion on screen. Without going into spoilers, but experiencing this moment is fantastic as Sam Fisher fucking cracks it. Immediately after this and going into gameplay, Fisher enters a berserker rage where any enemy who appears on screen is immediately marked and can be executed straight away. This only happens in one point of the campaign, and it doesn't happen again, and it's a fucking great moment. Voice acting again not beating a dead horse, but it's great. The last line from Sam Fisher is a great send-off for the series and for the character of Sam Fisher, and while it is great that we got Splinter Cell Blacklist, retrospectively it's a great last line from Michael Ironsides as Sam Fisher in a Splinter Cell title. Yes, he's back in Ghost Recon DLC, and yes, it's fucking awesome that he came back, but it's still a damn shame that we just haven't gotten a new Splinter Cell game in nearly 10 years. Lastly, the last mission basically being the siege of Washington and a battle to get to the White House. It's full of action, and being at ground zero of an attack, walking the streets is pretty damn rough. You see mercenaries controlling the streets and pushing the crowd back, blocking off streets, and there's even a scene where a car explodes killing some random character's wife, and it's pretty brutal, but it's also kinda cool because I can't think of a modern video game that has moments like this. But the score and the music in Conviction is fucking great. You'll have these patriotic style scores that seem like they've been pulled right out of a Michael Bay film, but inside the White House taking on mercenaries inside, the music that plays has famous presidential quotes with this rough techno electronic music that sounds pretty cool, but also has this like eerily ghost talking through the walls vibe. I really enjoyed this part.
Get down!
Splinter Cell Conviction, while not as stealthy or, well, really an espionage game like every other Splinter Cell game before it, it feels like the last entry in the series, where it's not, where Sam Fisher walks away from everything at the end. Yes, we did get Blacklist, which is set after this, but when looking at the Splinter Cell series, to have this as the last game to be a revenge title, a linear light stealth action, for it to turn into a light action title too at the end, works perfectly if you ask me. I loved Conviction the first time I played it, I love Conviction now in 2021. I streamed my entire time with Conviction on Twitch, and there's still a huge community that loves Splinter Cell, and we got Sam Fisher in Ghost Recon and in Rainbow Six Siege, but how long will it be till we get the return of the last spy in video games, Sam Fisher in his own Splinter Cell title in the future?
What your country can do for you.